Atomic Boom here to talk about Solo, a Star Wars story, which, much to my delight, is not as bad as The Last Jedi. In fact, I actually kind of enjoyed it, despite some hiccups along the way. Stick with me so I can tell you the reasons why. Solo, a Star Wars story. I have to say I was pleasantly surprised. I went to the 10 p.m. showing on this, and I went and I was tired after a long day doing yard work in the hot sun, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised. I really was. I walked out of that theater with a smile on my face because it wasn't a spectacular movie, but it was a good movie. It was a good movie. Actually, I agree with the comments by one of my YouTube friends, Spike Valentine, who's got a good channel. I recommend you check out Spike Valentine's YouTube channel and his review on this. He did a review of this when he was actually walking home from the theater, and his instincts, I think they match mine, at least in terms of an initial impression. And that is the fact that if you just go in and enjoy this movie as a heist movie, it's a space heist movie. This is a movie with a bunch of rebels just pulling off a robbery, and it's one giant space adventure. If you go in like that and just enjoy it for that, you'll have a really good time watching it, and it's a very entertaining movie. However, if you are a Star Wars movie and you're a die-hard Star Wars movie, and I'm middle of the road, I know more than your layperson does about Star Wars, but I don't know near as much as the die-hard Star Wars fans. Those guys know the expanded universe down pat and everything else. I'm not at their level. I'm sort of mid-range. For me, I could see, even for someone with my knowledge base of Star Wars, I could see some things that might really tick people off. And there are some things that maybe made me cringe a little bit, but for the most part, this is a movie that worked. First, let me tell you what I think really worked for this movie. I got to give full credit to the actor who played Han Solo, and that's Alden Ehrenreich. If I'm saying that name right, I'm bad with names, but Alden Ehrenreich, I thought he made Han Solo his own character. He did pretty good. I will say that even though he didn't sound like Han Solo to me, he did at times capture Harrison Ford's inflections and voice intonations and tones here and there enough that it felt reminiscent of the Han Solo that I know from the classic trilogy, and so I like that aspect of it. And I thought he really made it his own, so he did a fairly good job there. Another character that was well portrayed was Lando Calrissian. He was played by Donald Glover. I was surprised that I thought Donald Glover did a good job. He actually did sound, at times he sounded like the original actor whose name eludes me, who played Lando. So he did a pretty good job too. He doesn't override Han Solo. Han Solo as a character, he basically led this movie, and it always felt like he did, which was really good. No one overshadowed Han Solo in this movie. Chewbacca did not overshadow Han Solo. Lando Calrissian did not overshadow Han Solo. I find it very odd that some people watch that movie and actually think that, but I guess that just goes to show how subjective movies can be, and I guess you get out what maybe your expectations are going into. Everyone had their moment to shine. Chewbacca was violent in this movie, but I thought there'd be a little, for some reason I thought it'd be a little bit more violent. I was really hoping to see a little bit more violence by Chewbacca, a little bit more why he's this horrifying, terrifying Wookiee. I never really saw that here. He attacked, he beat up people, when they're in the mines and they're fighting off and he's rescuing some other Wookiees, they get violent, but he's basically just throwing people around. At one point, he sort of rips a person's arms right off, and it pisses off Han Solo, and Han says, I was going to wear that guy's clothes, but I guess I can't anymore since you ripped his limbs off. That was actually a funny scene. And I guess that was a violent scene, so maybe you might say, well, what am I talking about? I don't know. I just thought there'd be a little bit more clue. This is a younger Chewbacca. He's only 190 years old in this movie, as opposed to 200. It was still fun. The rapport between Han and Chewie was great. I was looking for a little bit more violence with the humor myself, but then maybe that would make it less of a Star Wars movie. But in any event, that part was pretty good. Other characters that stood out were Qi'ra, who played by Emilia Clarke. She played Han Solo's basically girlfriend. The movie starts off on the planet of Corellia, because as everyone from the classic trilogy knows, Han Solo is from the planet. He's a Corellian. He's a Corellian scumbag bounty hunter or whatever, rogue thief, whatever you want to call him. But it starts off on Corellia. One of the things that stood out about Corellia to me was that it's a very dark place. It looked like a futuristic London, and that's not a compliment. It looks like a dog's breakfast. It looks like a dark, gloomy place. I was very disappointed with how they portrayed Corellia. It should have been a better place. It should have been a brighter place. It shouldn't have been just a dog's breakfast. They also described Corellia as a place where rogues and rebels and where criminal mobsters recruit children into their criminal empires, and that it's basically it's a very dark and gloomy criminal marketplace, which I'm not an expert on the expanded universe, but I didn't think Corellia was just that dark. I was really hoping it was going to be not so dark. It was just a little dark. It starts off on Corellia with Han Solo and Qi'ra, who are clearly established as boyfriend and girlfriend, sort of trying to escape the clutches of Lady Proxima, who's voiced by Linda Hunt, and she's sort of a centipede-like mobster character that didn't really come off very well. She comes off out of the water, and then she's like a vampire. She's like a vampiric centipede where light can burn her face. It's really weird. Didn't quite work. It looked a little bit too CGI to me, but it was okay. It was actually kind of funny a little bit. See, again, I'm nitpicking here. None of this stuff, maybe I'm nitpicked, bothered me a little bit, but for the most part, none of it really took me out of the movie. When they finally, Han Solo escapes Corellia, and it's when he escapes Corellia that we discover how he got his name, and this really surprised me. At one point in the movie, Han describes his dad as having worked on ships similar to the Millennium Falcon, and so even though he said he never got along much with his dad, you would think that Han would at least know what his last name is, but he doesn't, and it's the oddest thing. And when he's sort of escaping Corellia, and he escapes Corellia by asking to join the Imperial fleet to become a pilot, he discovers that he doesn't tell the officer his last name, and so the officer says, "Oh, so you're riding solo, eh?" So, and then he writes down Han Solo, and it's kind of it just didn't really work for me. It sounded kind of dumb, again. Why can't his name just be Han Solo? I always thought it was kind of cool that his name was Han Solo, and that was the name that he was born with, and that he sort of like lived up to his name. He lived up to his birthright, because I thought it was cool, but to have it just such by random chance, I don't like that. It's in keeping with how they butchered the Force in the Last Jedi, where the Force, anybody can have it. Everything's by chance. It's random. Anybody can be a Force user. Anybody this, anybody that. And now Han Solo, his last name is simply by chance. Some Imperial guard gave him his last name randomly. I didn't like that aspect of it. But again, maybe I'm nitpicking. Not that big a deal. At one point, it switches to a scene where Han Solo eventually he's fighting with the Imperial, with the the Empire, on a random planet, and he meets up, and you can tell he's not really a diehard. He doesn't really believe too much in what the Empire is doing, or what the Imperial fleet is doing. And he meets up with Beckett. He meets up with other rogues and thieves, and he meets up with a guy named Beckett, who's played by Woody Harrelson. And Woody Harrelson is sort of a rogue and a thief himself, and he's got two compatriots by the name of Val and Rios. And Val is played by Thaddeus Newton, and Rio is voiced by the voice of Jon Favreau. And Rio is a CGI character, and in any event, he wants to escape the planet, and he wants to become a pilot. He wants to escape the planet and help them on a job and a mission that Beckett is on, so that he can buy his own ship and fly back to Corellia to rescue Qi'ra, who never made it off the planet when he escaped. Well, as it turns out, Beckett, who initially meeting Han, doesn't trust Han and basically betrays Han and accuses him of being a deserter, and the Imperial guards throw him into a pit where who is in the pit but Chewbacca, and a great interaction ensues where he actually speaks Chewbacca's language to him a little bit, and Chewbacca throws him around, roughs him up a bit, and they basically work together and they get out and they escape, and they eventually end up on the ship with Beckett, Val, and Rios as they basically take off to return to where Beckett originally came from, and that was from Dryden Voss, who is his boss, who's played by Paul Bettany. And Dryden Voss is sort of like the lead bad guy in the movie. He's sort of like the lead mobster who recruited Beckett to sort of steal for him some, I think it's coaxium. It's a mineral that powers all the starships in all the ships in the Star Wars universe are powered by this coaxium or coadmium. If I get it wrong, I apologize. It's unimportant, but it's this coaxium that they're trying to steal. And bottom line is the movie is them. In order to prevent themselves from being killed by Dryden Voss, they've got to go and steal some coaxium, and in order to do that, they have to make the famous Kessel Run. So they have to go to a mining planet, steal some coaxium, and then bring it back. And the reason why they have to make the Kessel Run so fast, in that so-called under 12 parsecs, or 13 parsecs if you round up, 12 if you round down, as Han would say. The reason why they have to make that Kessel Run so fast is that once they would get the coaxium on their ship, it degrades, and apparently it'll eventually explode. They got to stabilize it because it begins to degrade once it's exposed to the air. Once it's mined, it only keeps its integrity, its molecular integrity, for so long, after which it explodes. So it's very important once they get the coaxium on their ship, they got to make that Kessel Run lickety split in order to prevent, they don't want their ship to blow up. And so story wise, in that way, I kind of liked it. And going to the mining planet, along the way, they have to acquire the Millennium Falcon. Of course, when are we going to be introduced to the Millennium Falcon? And of course, they're introduced to the Millennium Falcon. They've got to go and meet Lando, and Qi'ra, Han's girlfriend, is actually she's one of the top lieutenants of Dryden Voss, who basically sends Qi'ra along with him, and Qi'ra happens to know Lando, and there's a great scene ensues where you think Han Solo is going to win the Millennium Falcon in a game of chance, in a game of cards, so to speak, or Sabat, I think is what they played, and Han Solo ends up losing because Lando cheats, but they still recruit Lando by promising him a cut of the take that they're going to get once they steal the coaxium. So Lando tags along with them when they're on the Kessel Run, and they end up on this, and then we're introduced to a character that is probably one of the most annoying things for me on the show, and annoying to a lot of people, is a character it's a droid character by the name of L337. And now L337, she's been called derogatively the SJW robot, the SJW droid, because she's all about droid rights. And to make it even worse, she's got that screeching, awful British accent, which I personally, it drives me insane. And so she's, not only does she have an awful accent for a droid, but she has that, she's got that SJW holier than thou, equal rights thing, which right now, I admit, is probably just the toxic politics going on right now, but it's really cringy, and she doesn't shut up. This droid won't shut up, and it's a relief when L337 is finally killed. It's actually relieving because thank God she's dead, because she just wouldn't shut up. Because L337, not only is she talking about droid rights, which is ridiculous because all droids basically follow what their masters do. I mean, I don't know why they want to introduce, they really want to introduce droid politics in Star Wars? Really? I mean, why? When did this become an issue? Do we really need that to be an issue? But in any event, whatever. It is what it is. But in any event, when they take this SJW L337 to the mining planet, she actually manages to get all the droids in this mining facility on her side. She basically starts a mini little rebellion, trying to encourage them all to work toward their freedom. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of cringeworthy. But again, on the other hand, you could sit back and you could laugh at it. You can. And I did. It was kind of funny. And I will admit that she did have some good jokes. And probably the funniest joke of all was apparently that she's in love with Lando. And this is where, guys, you probably heard online about how Lando's a pansexual. Now, we've all encountered situations where people read in all kinds of crazy things on a limited amount of evidence. There is virtually no evidence in this movie that Lando is a pansexual. Like, good God. First of all, why would you even want to go there? Like, you really want Lando Calrissian to be screwing a droid? Get your head out of the metal gutter, you disgusting person. Like, seriously? Like, to even contemplate that? And, look, no one ever thought Luke Skywalker wanted to do the nasty with R2-D2, but for some reason, they think Lando wants to do the nasty with his droid because she happens to talk. They did a terrible job. They portrayed L337 as being a lovesick woman, human woman, fawning over Lando Calrissian. Totally stupid. Totally stupid. It looked like a Saturday Night Live skit where there was one scene. It was funny. It was actually funny where she's fawning over Lando in front of Qi'ra in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. It was actually a funny scene, but it played like a Saturday Night Live skit. It was out of. It just didn't. It was just wrong. It was wrong, and it was wrong because later when the L337 unit gets killed and she's dying, and before they upload her navigational consciousness, navigational memory into the Millennium Falcon to help them make the Kessel Run, before she dies, Lando gets very emotional, and there's kind of a sick and disgusting whole scene to the scene that he's holding her, and the fact that anybody might see some sexual element to that is disgusting. It really is disgusting. And I think it was a big miss and a big mistake for them to have done that. I mean, look, to me, this is the equivalent of you owning a dog. Look, if your dog dies, of course you're going to get upset, but everybody knows that you're upset that your dog died. People aren't going to assume that you've been screwing your dog. There's a big difference. So why they set it up that way, I think it was just wrong. And plus, then all you do is you get all these SJWs in real life jumping on the bandwagon and saying, he's a pansexual. Come on. Seriously? But whatever. But again, it didn't take me out of the movie. It's just one of those things where I'm laughing at it, but I'm laughing at the stupidity of it. Because it really was stupid. And I think it insulted Lando's character. Because they should have played it that he loved his droid like you'd love your dog. Because one of the things in the expanded universe that was established is that Lando would later go on in his life, and before he became leader of Cloud City, he actually created a droid building facility. And so that would have an impact on his life. And it was also interesting that it was a nice little tribute to L337 that they uploaded her navigational memory into the Millennium Falcon, which they needed to do in order for them to know how to navigate through to escape effectively and efficiently through the Kessel Run. But in any event, that was a little bit of a cringeworthy moment, but it worked fine. Now, there's another character in this movie called Envis Nest that is, I think, particularly might be controversial to some. And Envis Nest was a bounty hunter who kept following around Beckett, and Val, and Rios, and Han, and Chewie as they went, and they initially tried to steal some coaxium early on in the movie. And this bounty hunter, Envis Nest, and she had her Cloud Riders. So there's Envis Nest and her Cloud Riders, which they attacked, and in their attack against Beckett and his crew, which included Han and Chewie, and like I said, Val and Rios, by attacking them, Val ended up getting killed, and Rios ended up getting killed. Now, what makes Envis Nest such an odd, a controversial character is, at the end, when she reveals herself to be a good person. Now, a lot of people are making a big deal out of the fact that she reveals herself and she's a woman. Well, I don't care that she's a woman. She's actually a teenager. Okay, that's fine. I don't care about that. It's still a cool character. But what's a little bit odd is she was kind of on the same sides of them. So why was she initially killing? Why was she attacking potential allies? Because she attacks Beckett and crew and Han early on, sacrificing a lot of her own Cloud Riders in the process. Meanwhile, some of Beckett's own men gets killed, and we lose Val and Rios, which are interesting characters, and they're killed off. All because Enfys Nest is apparently working for the rebels, and she's trying to get the Coaxium to help the fledgling Rebel Alliance against the Empire, and the Rebel Alliance won't become into their full power until, 10 years later, or it's 7 years later, I guess, in the events of New Hope, because again, there's that 3-year time jump in the movie. But in any event, it seemed a little bit odd to me that, a little bit out of character that, on the one hand, she kills, and then at the end of the movie, instead of killing Beckett when she has the chance, she introduces herself, takes her helmet off, and says, "Here, would you please help me? Like, I work for the Rebel Alliance." And then Han, of course, sides with her, and at the end, she sees some good in Han, and she invites Han at that stage to join the Rebel Alliance. And of course, Han says no. It's not in his way, as he doesn't want to do that. Of course, we know when he's made that offer a second time at the end of Star Wars: A New Hope, he comes back and he protects Luke Skywalker from being destroyed by Darth Vader, and Luke Skywalker destroys the Death Star. But in any event, interesting. Enfys Nest, a little bit of the character was a little misdirection there. What's interesting about Enfys Nest is that while she's a teenager in this movie, she theoretically could still be alive for Episode 9, and that's what I find interesting. Definitely worth checking out there. Will Enfys Nest make an appearance in Episode 9? Because she'll be old enough. She'll still be around. And same with Qi'ra, by the way. Now let's talk about Qi'ra, because Qi'ra is very interesting, because one of the biggest surprises in this movie, I think, was the Darth Maul's appearance. Qi'ra is actually, it ends up that Dryden Voss, who is ultimately killed by Qi'ra, because Dryden Voss, basically, Qi'ra was, you got the impression Qi'ra was his top lieutenant, but also you got the impression that maybe she was a sex slave as well. But hey, maybe I'm reading too much into that. But if some of you guys can read it into a sexual relationship between a droid and Lando, I can read a sexual relationship in between Qi'ra and Dryden Voss, all right? So in any event, that's she kills Dryden Voss, and then she takes Dryden Voss's ring off and to communicate with Dryden Voss's boss, who ends up being Darth Maul. And it's very interesting because if those of you, I'm sure you all know, Darth Maul was supposedly killed at the end of Phantom Menace, and he was chopped in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi. And of course, when they show him here, he's got nothing but a mechanical leg, so he's all mechanical below the waist, which is pretty cool. So now, for people who watch the Clone Wars, you'll know that Darth Maul, in fact, does survive and is ultimately killed by Obi-Wan Kenobi again, but for good this time. But that isn't until much later on. And in any event, the fact that Darth Maul tells Qi'ra to go to Dagomar is very interesting, because just this movie sets up Han Solo on his path toward becoming a good guy, so to speak, a good guy and a potential general for the Rebel Alliance for 7 to 10 years hence. And yet we know Qi'ra is heading toward the dark side under the influence of Darth Maul. Now Darth Maul is no longer he's got force powers, and he's force sensitive, and he's dark side sensitive, but he's no longer affiliated with the Emperor at this point, because he would have been rejected because he was defeated by Obi-Wan, and the Emperor, of course, moved to embracing Anakin to be his number 2. One interesting little observation that I made, and I know it's been made by others, is there's no mention of a life debt. One of the things that was mentioned in Star Wars: A New Hope was that Chewie owed Han Solo a life debt, and that's why he was partners with Han Solo. Now, what's the origins of that life debt? We don't know. Han Solo did save Chewbacca's life in this movie. Chewbacca also saved Han Solo's life a few times in this movie. So at what point did this adventure occur where Chewbacca clearly tells Han that he's got a life debt to him? That's not established in this movie, so that might be in another future movie, but it's not established in this one. Another interesting thing might be worth noting is the dice. The dice appear in this movie. Han Solo's dice that he puts in the Millennium Falcon. Basically what the dice are, the dice are basically Han Solo's good luck charm. At the beginning of the movie, when him and Qi'ra are trying to escape Corellia, he gives her the dice to give her good luck, because they're good luck to him. And he manages to escape, but one of the reasons why it's interesting, while Han Solo is successful in escaping Corellia, he has the dice in his hands as he does so, because Qi'ra throws him the dice, and so he ends up with the dice back in his hands, and he escapes and Qi'ra doesn't, only to become under the employ of Dryden Voss and ultimately Darth Maul at the end of the movie. And those dice play a role there, and throughout the movie they'll show the dice. And in fact, at the very last scene of the movie, when the Millennium Falcon embarks on hyperspace, you see the hyperspace special effects behind the dice. So the dice do seem to play a role there, and I think it was a nice little cool sequence. I didn't mind that at all. I thought it was a nice. It sort of pulls you forward, because you know those dice are also hanging on the chair at one point in The Last Jedi. As much as I wasn't a huge fan of The Last Jedi, I have to acknowledge that as bad as Last Jedi was, for multiple reasons, and as damaging as it was, I think, to the franchise on multiple levels, at least they gotta work with it. I mean, you gotta put lipstick on the pig somehow, right? Another interesting little callback is at one point in the movie, Lando exclaims to Han Solo, "I hate you," and Han says, "I know," which for those of you who you probably remember that in Empire Strikes Back, when Princess Leia says to Han Solo, "I love you," he says, "I know," and here it is with Lando saying, "I hate you," and Han saying, "I know." So that was funny. And it did not imply any sexual tension between Han and Lando. But again, it's amazing how many dirty minds are out there. I always thinking that there's got to be sex related, right? Han and Lando, they're not gay. Sorry, SJWs, ain't gonna happen. It's just a joke. It's funny. It's a callback. If there's one overriding theme in this movie, I would say it's survival. Han wants to survive Corellia and escape and become a pilot. Qi'ra wants to survive and get out of being out of a criminal influence of Dryden Voss and ultimately Darth Maul. Beckett wants to escape and just even though he's going to involve in betraying everybody, the fledgling rebel alliance needs to survive, and that's represented by Enfys Nest. It's struggling to survive. I mean, the theme of survival is prevalent throughout this whole movie, and it really drives it forward. And I think it's a fitting theme, given that the Rebel Alliance is slowly becoming more and more powerful, and it begins to grow in large part because of rogues and rebels, as personified by Han Solo and even Beckett. There's a great scene at the end and it's the shoot first scenario. You remember all that controversy about whether or not Han shot Guido first, and that Han was a bad guy because he shot Guido first, and then George Lucas changed it so that Guido shot him first. Well, that's all a bunch of the fact is Han Solo was a rogue. Of course he shot first, and I love the fact that Han Solo at the end of this movie, at one point he has a standoff between him and Beckett. Beckett's betraying him. And you could tell Beckett's just setting him up to shoot Han. And before Beckett can even get started in much of his conversation, Han just shoots him. He shoots him first. And it's a great scene. And you know that Han, that was a turning point for Han. It was like, it was almost like, with Kylo. Kylo's turning point was when he kills his father, Han Solo. And for Han Solo to truly embrace being a rogue and a rebel, and a little bit of a bad guy, and the dark side in himself as a thief, he had to shoot first. And that's the dark side of Han coming out, and he's shooting it's almost like he's shooting his mentor Beckett. So I thought that was nice too. That was a nice little play on the themes involved there. Guys, overall, I like this movie. It wasn't bad at all. Again, the most cringe-worthy moment would be the SJW droid. But again, at least she could be played for a joke and for laughs, which not surprisingly, SJWs in real life are jokes and laughs too. We joke and we laugh about them all the time. So it's kind of fitting that the SJW droid is considered a joke in this movie and is made fun of, and of course, dies. That's the important thing. Dies. And of course, with her navigational memories being uploaded in the Millennium Falcon, it's at least we don't have to hear her. You know, she can just guide the Millennium Falcon, you know, but we don't have to hear her speak. Thank God, because if the Millennium Falcon could talk, if it sounded like that droid, that would drive, nobody would go to any of the Star Wars movies, believe me. But in any event, guys, that's my review of Solo, A Star Wars Story. Overall, I would have to give this, as a regular movie-going fan, I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed it. As a Star Wars fan, I would give it a 6.5 out of 10. So that's my review, and until next time, guys, Comic Boom out.